My daughter-in-law called me a burden at my own son's rehearsal dinner. Not quietly, not by accident. She leaned across the table, wine glass in hand, and said it loud enough for the whole private room to hear. Honestly, wouldn't it just be easier if your father stayed home tomorrow? He's going to be a burden on everyone. My son Eli went pale. His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. A few of his friends looked down at their plates. And me? I just reached for my water glass, took a slow sip, and smiled. Because I had been waiting for exactly that moment. Let me back up. My name is Harold. Wait, no. The story starts the way most painful things do, quietly, months before anyone realized something was wrong. I'm 58 years old. I retired early from 26 years as a civil engineer. The kind of work that doesn't make you famous but pays steadily and, if you're careful, builds into something real over time. My wife Carol Ann passed 4 years ago from pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to gone. After that, it was just me in the house in Asheville, North Carolina, and whatever relationship I could hold together with my son. Eli is 31. He's sharp, kind-hearted, works in software sales out of Charlotte. He got his mother's patience and, thankfully, her laugh when he called me last spring to say he'd met someone, really met someone, the kind that matters. I was genuinely glad for him. I asked about her. He said her name was Vanessa. No, wait. Her name was Petra. He said she was confident, driven, worked in pharmaceutical sales, knew what she wanted. He sounded so sure when he talked about her that I didn't ask the questions I should have asked. I just said, bring her home, let me meet her. They drove up to Asheville in April. I made pot roast, the one Carol Ann used to make with the carrots and the little pearl onions, because it was Eli's favorite and I wanted her to feel welcomed. I set the table properly. Put out the good napkins. Petra walked in and looked around the house the way a real estate assessor might. Not rude exactly, just evaluating. She complimented the rustic charm of the place, which is a way of calling something old without saying old. She was polite over dinner, asked me a few questions about retirement, nodded when I answered. But there was something behind her eyes, a kind of arithmetic running constantly, adding things up, subtracting others. I noticed she never asked about Carol Ann. Not once. Ellie had told her about his mother. I knew he had. But Petra never mentioned her, never asked to see a photo, never said, I'm sorry for your loss. That's a small thing, maybe. But small things have a way of showing you the shape of something larger. After dinner, when Eli was in the kitchen doing dishes and Petra and I were alone in the living room, she glanced at my hands resting on the arm of the chair. My left hand trembles slightly. Has since a minor stroke 2 years back. Nothing serious. Fully recovered. But the tremor stayed. She watched it for a moment, then looked away without saying anything. Again, small. But I filed it. They got engaged in June. Eli called me over the moon, and I told him I was happy. Because I was. I wanted to be wrong about Petra. I wanted my read on her to be nothing more than an old man's grief making him suspicious of anyone who might take his son further away. But then the comments started. The first one came at Eli's birthday dinner in July. We were at a restaurant in Charlotte, nice place, brick walls, good bourbon list, and Petra made a joke about how I'd ordered the cheapest entree on the menu. She laughed when she said it, framed it as teasing, and Eli smiled uncomfortably. I let it go. The second came a few weeks later. Petra was telling a story about a colleague whose father-in-law was apparently very wealthy, kept buying the young couple things, funding vacations. She turned to Eli and said, half laughing, "We don't exactly have that problem, do we?" She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't need to. The third time, she said it directly. We were discussing the rehearsal dinner venue. She wanted a private room at a steakhouse downtown Charlotte, which ran about $4,000 for the evening. And she mentioned offhandedly that Eli and she were covering it themselves because, and here's the exact phrasing she used, we knew not to expect help from that direction. That direction. like I was a weather system, something to be planned around. I went home that night and sat in Carol Ann's chair. I still think of it as hers, and I stayed very still for a long time, not angry, not yet. Something cooler than anger. More like clarity, because here's what Petra didn't know. Carol Ann came from a family of considerable means. Her father had built a regional construction company in Tennessee over 40 years. The kind of business that looks modest from the outside and is anything but. When he passed, 8 years before Carol Ann did, he left his estate to his 2 children. Carol Ann's share was $4.2 million, which she invested conservatively and which, combined with what I'd built over my career, meant that I had retired at 54 with a net worth just over $11 million. Not old money, not flashy money, just careful, quiet money, the kind that doesn't announce itself. I had never told Eli the exact number. I told him we were comfortable, that he didn't need to worry, that the house was paid off and I had more than enough. He didn't push further. He's not that kind of son. And Petra, who had apparently decided I was a drain on their future rather than a resource in it, had no idea. Now, here is where I want to be honest about something, because I've thought about it a great deal since. What I did next was not impulsive. It was not revenge in the hot-blooded sense. It was a question I needed answered before my son bound himself legally and permanently to this woman. Is she cruel only to people she perceives as beneath her? Or is this something that comes out only under pressure? I needed to know which kind of person she was. So I gave her more pressure. I started showing up to family gatherings looking worse than I was. Not dramatically. I didn't use a wheelchair or fake a condition. But I stopped getting the haircut as regularly. I wore older clothes, as the trimmer in my hand be more visible rather than compensating for it the way I'd learned to do. I mentioned, casually in conversation, that I was looking at downsizing, that the Asheville house might be too much to maintain on a fixed income. I talked about my limited budget in ways that were vague enough to be plausible. And I bought a small digital recorder, the kind that clips to a shirt pocket and picks up a room clearly from 6 feet away. I want to be clear, I didn't do this to trap her, I did it to see her. The recorder was for me, so I could listen back and be sure I wasn't misreading things the way grief can make you misread things. What I heard over the next 3 months was worse than what I'd suspected. At a Sunday lunch in August, when Eli stepped outside to take a work call, Petra said to me directly, "You know, Eli works really hard. It would mean a lot to him if you could be less of a financial worry down the line. Have you looked into assisted living options? Just, planning ahead." I was 58 years old and had no health conditions requiring assisted living. I smiled and said I appreciated the thought. At a September dinner with Petra's parents, lovely people, her mother in particular, warm and genuinely interested in Eli. Petra introduced me as Ellie's dad. He's retired, just kind of takes it easy up in the mountains. Said it the way you might describe a stray cat that's become a fixture. Her mother looked slightly uncomfortable. I smiled again. And then, at the rehearsal dinner in October, she said the word, burden. My son went pale. I took a slow sip of water. And when the table went quiet and Eli started to say something, defending me, which is his nature, I held up one hand. "It's all right," I said. "She's not entirely wrong to think about logistics. Big days take planning." Petra relaxed. She smiled, picked up her wine glass. She thought she'd won something. The wedding was the next afternoon. I want to describe it accurately because the details matter. It was a beautiful venue, a restored barn outside Charlotte, the kind with Edison string lights and reclaimed wood and a catering team that actually knew what they were doing. About 120 guests. Eli looked like his mother when he was nervous. The way his jaw sets and his eyes go a little too still. He looked nervous at the altar, but a good nervous. The kind that means something is real. I sat in the front row on the groom's side. I'd gotten a haircut. I wore the charcoal suit I'd bought for Carol Ann's sister's daughter's wedding 2 years back, the good one, with the pocket square. A few of Eli's friends came over before the ceremony started, and we talked about the Panthers, about how Charlotte had changed, normal things. I felt fine. I felt if I'm honest, better than I had in months. During the reception, I was cordial to everyone. I danced once with Eli's college friend's mother because she asked, and it seemed rude to say no. I gave a toast, short, honest, about how Eli had always made me proud and how I hoped they built something together worth being proud of. I meant it. Petra's family was there in full. Her parents, her two sisters, an aunt from Phoenix who'd flown in, various cousins, her father, a man named Clive, was a decent man who clearly loved his daughter and was choosing not to see certain things. I understood that. I've done it myself. The moment came during the open bar portion of the evening when a loose cluster of guests, Petra's sisters, two of her girlfriends, and Eli's college roommate, a good-natured guy who had no idea what was happening, had gathered near the high-top tables along the side wall. I was standing nearby. I had been standing nearby with my recorder for about 20 minutes. Petra was talking about the honeymoon. They were going to Portugal, Lisbon, and then the Alentejo wine region, which is genuinely wonderful. And I'd actually been there once with Carol Ann, and one of her sisters asked something about the finances of the trip, how they were managing with saving for a house, and also doing a big international honeymoon. Petra said, with the ease of someone who'd said it many times in private, "Ellie's been amazing. We're doing it ourselves. We didn't want to depend on anyone, especially not." And here she tilted her head very slightly in my direction. Just enough, you know. We knew we were on our own. Her girlfriend laughed. "Smart," she said. "It's just," Petra continued, voice dropping, but not enough, not nearly enough. "Some people you can count on, and some people are just sort of there. We love him, but realistically he's not exactly a resource, you know. He's more of a—" She stopped herself, but the word was already in the air between us from the night before, and we both knew it. I reached into my breast pocket. Not for the recorder, which had already done its work. I reached for the folded document my attorney had prepared 6 weeks earlier. A single-page summary on her firm's letterhead of my current asset statement. $11.3 million as of that September. The actual property alone was assessed at $890,000. There were brokerage accounts, the inherited trust, a small commercial property in Brevard I'd bought with 2 partners a decade back, and which had appreciated considerably. I unfolded it without drama and handed it to Eli's college roommate, who happened to be standing closest to me. "Would you mind passing that down?" I said. He looked at it. His eyebrows went up. He passed it. It reached Petra's hands in about 4 seconds. The silence that followed was not immediate. It moved through her face in stages like weather. First confusion, reading, then recalibration, the arithmetic behind your eyes running hard in a new direction. Then something that might have been color draining, or might have been the lights. One of her girlfriends leaned over to read it. Then the other sister, Ellie, appeared from somewhere behind me. I still don't know what drew him over at exactly that moment. Perhaps the change in the room's air. And he looked at the paper in his wife's hand, and then at me. "Dad?" he said. "I should have told you the number directly," I said. "I'm sorry about that. I thought you knew we were in good shape." I paused. I didn't know it mattered to others. Eli looked at Petra. Petra looked at me. Then at the paper. Then at the room, which had gone partially quiet in that spreading ripple way rooms do, when something has shifted. I said, and this part I had thought about carefully for weeks, want to be transparent about something. I took out my phone, opened the voice memo app, and pressed play. My attorney had advised me, and I want to be clear that I did check. North Carolina is a one-party consent state for recordings. I had every legal right. What came out of the phone speaker, in Petra's own voice, in various kitchens and dining rooms over the preceding months, the assisted living comment, the not a resource comment, the word burden from the night before, sharp and clear in a quiet room. I didn't play all of it. I played about 90 seconds. 90 seconds is enough. Petra's father, Clive, was standing 6 feet away. He heard it. Her mother heard it. Her sisters heard it. Eli's college roommate heard it and had the decency to look at the floor. Eli stood very still. I stopped the recording, put my phone back in my pocket, and said, "And this is the only part I rehearsed, the only sentence I actually wrote down beforehand and memorized. I love you, son. Whatever you decide, I'm in your corner. I always have been." Then I got my jacket from the coat check, shook hands with the bartender, because he'd done a fine job all evening, and drove the 2.5 hours back to Asheville. Eli called me the next morning. He didn't say much. He said he needed some time to think. I said that was more than fair. He filed for an annulment, not a divorce, an annulment, which his attorney apparently determined was possible, given the brevity of the marriage and certain other factors I won't detail. 11 days later. He told me about it over the phone. His voice was quiet and tired in the way that means someone has done their grieving already and has come out the other side into something more clear. We didn't talk about the money for several weeks. When we finally did, I told him everything. The inheritance from his grandfather, the investments, what it added up to. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Mom knew all this?" "It was hers," I said. "I just kept it safe." He cried a little. So did I. Petra sent me one message, about 3 weeks after the annulment was finalized. It was long, and I won't quote it directly, but the substance was an apology that spent more time explaining her behavior than owning it, which is a particular kind of apology that tells you everything you need to know. I didn't respond. I think about what Clive must have felt, standing in that barn, hearing his daughter's voice say those things. I have some sympathy for him. I do. Not for her, not yet. But for the people who love someone and keep choosing not to see. Here's what I know now that I didn't know completely when this started. Protecting your child doesn't stop when they turn 18, or 30, or 35. It just changes shape. Sometimes you make the pot roast and put out the good napkins and give her every chance to be what you hope she is. Sometimes she takes those chances and shows you something else instead. And sometimes you fold a piece of paper and hand it down a line of people and let the truth do what the truth does on its own. Carol Ann would have hated the drama of it. She would have told me there was a quieter way. She was probably right. But she also would have wanted Eli free of someone who measured his father's worth in dollars and found it insufficient, and then measured it again and simply resented the correction. Eli drove up to Asheville last month. We ate at the kitchen table, just the two of us, the good plates, a bottle of the Tempranillo I'd been saving since that Portugal trip years ago. He stayed the weekend. We drove up the Blue Ridge Parkway on Sunday morning when the fog was still low in the valleys, and the trees had just started turning. He didn't say much. Neither did I. We didn't need to. Some things repair themselves if you give them enough quiet and enough time.